the good news. Introducing Steve Simmons, weather. Derek Jones, sports. Greg Conrad, crime. And your host, Brian Smith. Hello, tonight on The Good News, death, blood and horror. We will be looking into the dangerous life of Australian gangland and one of the most sinister gangs of all time, only known as The Family, set up by the Finley brothers.
It was here that it all began, this small house where the Finley brothers grew up. Their parents, Steve and Agnes Finley, soon found out that their children were evil after they robbed their first bank at the age of 5.
Here we have Gerald, the Finley brothers' best friend before they were sentenced to 10 years in juvenile detention. Gerald, can you please tell us what Bob and Fred were like in their younger years? Well, there are some very horrific details. Back to the studio.
When the Finley brothers were released from juvenile detention, they soon robbed multiple banks, armed with assault rifles and rocket launchers which they received from their Year 12 teacher.
Well, Bob was one of my best students. He got the best grades when he could afford it. When he ran out of money though, well, he threatened to run my head over with a lawnmower. So I had no choice.
And what happened then?
Well, I had no choice. I had to give him the good grades. Then once he finished year 10, he got involved in violence and stuff, and he was demanding weapons, and I mean, he was crazy. I couldn't afford weapons on a teacher's salary.
So did he run you over with the lawnmower?
No, I knew a guy from Frankston High School who has a rocket launcher and AK-47 in his classroom, so I got some off him.
When we asked to talk to Fred Finley's lawyer, he didn't want anything to do with us. After spending a few weeks outside his house, we finally managed to talk to him. Sir, are you happy with how the court trials came out?
No comment.
Are you happy with your actions and how they turned out?
No, I'm not actually. This is not my car.
Sir! After the two brothers graduated, with excellent marks in a string of sweatshops, they began to grow apart. Bob moved to China, setting up his business of making fortune cookies, unfortunately meeting his demise when he choked him on at his desk. Fred stayed in his hometown of Mordialloc, setting up The Family with a few of his friends. Their activities consisted of gun smuggling, money laundering, and the occasional game of lawn bowls. We spoke to one of his friends, Philip Stevens, a former SAS commando. Mr. Stevens, what can you tell us about Fred Finley?
Well, we've known each other for quite a while. I guess you could say we became close friends. After I left the service, I began working with Fred, helping him with the muscle work. If someone wasn't paying the protection money, I'd have to go around and sort them out.
What other kind of work did you do?
Well, Fred often asked me to make sure some of the deals went smoothly. If the other party wasn't playing ball, I'd have to get a bit physical.
Physical?
Yeah, didn't really want to hurt them, didn't want to beat some of them up, but business is business.
And how many people do you think you got physical with?
That's a little personal, don't you think? Well, I'd say about 500 people all up in about 10 years, although most of the time I only ran them over with my car. Nothing too drastic, but Fred was always a fair man and took in consideration the client's excuse.
We asked the people on the street what they thought of The Family.
It was terrible. I asked for a loan of $1,000 from Fred, and I had a month to pay it back, otherwise he'd have me sorted out. After a month, I paid him back, but he wasn't interested. Instead, he shoved me in his boot and drove me off a cliff. Luckily, my stuntman got me out there in time, before I fell to my death.
So Fred Finley came to my house because I owed him some money. But then he stole my guinea pig, and he killed my grandma. My grandma was fine, but he microwaved my guinea pig, Mr. Giblets. And I love Mr. Giblets, like I love Mr. Giblets. And he microwaved Mr. Giblets, and he gave him to me, and he was like, yo dog, here's some lasagna. And I said, hey bro, I don't eat lasagna. But he said, bitch, today you eating lasagna. So I ate lasagna, and that was the day I didn't become a vegetarian.
We talked to Fred's longtime girlfriend, Margaret.
When I first met Fred, he was charming and romantic. He always took me out to the fanciest restaurants and to see the opera. He didn't, however, understand that women such as myself didn't want to go see action movies or play video games. It's just a good thing I didn't mind the strip clubs. When he told me that he was moving out of state for a few years to sort out business elsewhere, the most romantic thing he said to me was that he promised to not see any more female impersonators while he was gone.
In 2008, the police finally began to take notice of the family's movements and decided enough was enough. So they began with the Operation Catch the Bastards. This operation was coordinated by Senior Constable Ripley.
We first began tailing the family, tracking each member's whereabouts. Then when we gathered enough information, we began closing in on them. For the first time, the family was really feeling the threat of the Victorian police force.
I see. Please, go on.
It was at this point that Fred Finley was appointed the chief of police and rendered the operation void. Despite this, myself and other fellow police officers decided to take the family down outside of the law. We staked out Fred Finley and a number of his associates and followed them to their safe house, cunningly disguised as primary school. We then entered and chased them down to make the arrest. We then proceeded to take them downtown to the undercover office to get the information out of them. It turns out that we didn't get the Finley boys. In fact, we got teachers of the primary school. Fred Finley did in fact move the interstate.
It just so happened that when Fred Finley arrived in New South Wales, he was mistaken to be an undercover police officer and was murdered by a local gang, who just so happened to be run by his long-lost sister, who was the result of his father's affair with his Greek maid. That concludes tonight's look on Australian Gangland on the Good News. Next week we'll be showing you how to rob a bank. Thank you, good night.